I'm up in Michigan, and I guess we can see that Detroit's written down here. That's where all of the population is, down in the corner. I'm way up in the opposite direction with a resort area up in northern Michigan where everybody comes to play, and I get to live here. It's a great place. We love it here. I'm going to do a nut bowl. Okay, so let's talk about, before I get into turning, let's talk about bowls and nut bowls and a little bit of design considerations and things. So I went around my house and pulled out some bowls. All of them have some kind of an undercut rim. Okay, and I kind of like that kind of bowl. And this is a piece of koa that Fred sent me back over from Hawaii, and it was a koa crotch. And so I wanted to just find a way to display that crotch nicely and where everybody could see it. So to put it in a hollow form may or may not have captured all of this character of the crotch. I could probably have, but the piece of wood really lent itself, a narrow piece of wood like this, to a bowl. And so, okay, well, I'm going to put that crotch in the bottom of the bowl so it's visible and still undercut that shoulder, still make it a bit of a hollow form, but have an open enough so that people could see in there. Well, I have a definition. My definition of a hollow form is that I can't reach the inside with a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge, a bevel supported cut gouge. So this is a hollow form. Even though it's kind of a bowl, it's a hollow form because the tools that I need would be my boring bar to come up and undercut this shoulder. This is too steep of an angle here to have a bevel supported cut. The boring bar hits the other side of the bowl as I'm going in there. So this is a hollow form, but it's an example of an undercut rim bowl. The methods that I'm going to use now is not to tuck this in so far so that I can use a bowl gouge or a spindle gouge to get in there and have a bevel supported cut. Okay, what do we call a nut bowl? Okay, a nut bowl is a bowl that we can reach in and we can grab some nuts and walk away and have something to chew on, right? What happens if we put those same nuts in a bowl that doesn't have an undercut rim? This is one of Mike's bowl he's got out back here. It's not even finished yet, but if I take my hand and I scoop out nuts, or I prefer M&Ms, but let's say they're nuts, what's going to happen? They're just going to fall out on the table, and I have to take one nut at a time out. Well, so maybe that's why they call it a nut bowl, because you can have access to what the contents are by the handful. So at least that's my definition of it. This is one that Mike did. That's this is beech. Okay. Now this one has the capability of getting the bevel support cut in here. It's not so severely undercut, and so this is a bowl and a nicely shaped contour to it. That's elm. This is one of mine. This is a pleasing shape that's kind of an arc of a sphere. Not quite. I didn't want to make it perfectly spherical because that's really hard to do. If you're not perfect, it looks like it's off a little bit. This is one I did recently. This is a piece of elm that just came down really near my home, but I wanted to make it a little bit of an undercut shoulder. And this again is a bowl because I can reach it with a bevel supported cut. So that's what we're going to do here, is do a bowl similar to this one probably, with just a little bit of an undercut shoulder that we can get in there and talk about the dynamics of what's going on to the grain and things on the inside. Have just a piece of maple here, just plain Jane, straight grain maple, nothing fancy. And I'm just going to touch that little pin and bring the live center up. and then I'm going to let go. Now that I'm on my balance point, I'm going to lock the spindle, and I'm going to tighten it up, make sure everything is tight. So now I'm going to get my tool rest about as close as I can here to my corners, right here and here. Okay, so my tool rest is close. When I turn the lathe on, there's just going to be a blur. The wood's going to be going around, and I just don't see a bunch of air, but I know the wood is there because I just put the tool rest close to it. Okay, so now I can get the speed up. Let me cover that balance point. One more step is that this balance point is only a starting point. It just gives us a chance to true it up and start to look at it and see how we're going to make this bowl and what we're going to do to make this something special and not just settle for the axis that we're on with our screw chuck or whatever method we're using. And the bowl is a good format to understand these. The push and the pull cut have bevel support, and the scrape and the shear scrape have a different completely rule, a line across there between the two separate kinds of turning. Bevel supported cut and a scraping and shear scraping has a 90-degree rule, and we'll cover those. So the push cut is the workhorse, is the thing we do most of the time, and we're going to use that. Our bowl now, our bowl blank, is running the grain. Which way is the grain going? The first question we have to ask when we walk up to the lathe. I'm going to put the tree on so that the grain is running perpendicular to the bed. And it's always easier to go in the side of the tree than it is to go in the end of the tree. I'm going to make my cut this direction into the side grain, not this direction into the end grain. All right, so I'm going to put my tool rest parallel to the bed here so I can go across and take those side grain fibers. So I'm going to put my gouge on the tool rest, anchor down. I've got the bevel support following in the line I'm going to travel. So the handle is on an angle here. The flute is pointing in a direction I'm going to travel, that direction, and it's on a 45-degree twist. And that's going to give me efficiency of a nice clean cut. So let's go back over to this. So just for fun here, with all of these square corners, it doesn't get any harder than that, right? I'm just going to use my fingertips here just to start. No big deal. All the forces of the cut are absorbed by the lathe and the tool rest. So I don't have to work hard. And this is why I don't need the bandsaw. Everything is easy. And then I'm going to use an overhand grip, and I can take bigger shavings. And see, I slowed my pace down a little bit. It gives me a nice clean cut. It's left behind because I want to take a good look at this wood and make some decisions on my design. So let's prepare for a chucking method now that's going to hold us, and we're going to make a little flat spot here that I'm going to seat a glue block on. We're going to use a glue block, and that glue block has to shoulder on its rim, and so I'm going to make a little reveal here so that it'll get a good glue joint. I'm not going to use a chuck. I'm not going to get into that again, but a chuck is a weak link, and I don't want to have a weak link. I want to grab this stronger, and a glue block is a lot stronger, safer holding method than a chuck. So again, I'm going right into the side of the tree. Notch, notch, notch. I'm not going to go this way because that's going into the end grain. I could cut that way, but it's not efficient. So we're going to take some of this, make a nice big shavings. I'm making shavings, not sawdust. All right. So now everything we've done so far is a push cut. We roughed it out, and we've gotten all the waste wood out of the way. And now we're going to go back, skip down to a scraping cut. And every time I had a push cut, I had bevel support on it, even when there was air spaces. The bevel was lined up. Now we're going to skip to the scraping cut. The scraping cut has a 90-degree rule. Whenever we scrape, we have to scrape it less than 90 degrees. And this is a regular scraper that we would use, or the scraper that we might use on a boring bar system. And if that's hitting the wood at less than 90 degrees, the wood's going to come down and scrape and we'll be good. All right. If I get past 90 degrees, it's not going to scrape anymore. It's going to dig in and get a catch. So whenever we're scraping, we have to scrape it less than 90 degrees. All right, and I'm going to scrape on the bottom of this bowl to clean up all of those tool marks that I made from my push cut. If I'm doing a push cut correctly, I'll have tool marks because of the using the tip of the tool only. I'm not using the wing with the push cut. All right, so when we're going to do a scraping cut, I'm going to bring the top edge up close to the wood, and I'm going to cut with the bottom edge. I'm going to roll that flute over. Now here's where my parabolic flute comes in. If I had a U-shaped flute like Doug Thompson has some of his that are V&Us, the U-shape wouldn't work for this. I can't shear, scrape, or scrape with a U-shaped tool. I need a parabolic flute is more friendly for this. That bottom angle here is less than 90 degrees. As long as the top edge is close, I can never get a catch. So I have in my hand right here, where'd my tool gouge go? I have in my hand right here a guaranteed no catch scraper. So that's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to close that flute over and cut with the bottom edge and have the top edge close. What I don't want to do is have it open like this. If it's open like this, then that bottom edge now is going to go right into the wood and get an ugly catch. So now with that flute closed, I can use that entire wing. I got the broad brush of that whole 3/4 of an inch area there that I can use to clean up those tool marks with. Can't see it very well from there, but I do have, see the tool marks in there? Because of the push cut, each time I stop, I have a little tool mark in there. All right, so I wanted to get this over here so you can see that. I'm going to close the flute now and scrape with the bottom. And I just go back and forth. Now, the scraping cut is not a hog and off cut. I can't do a whole lot of work with this. I'm just refining the line, just taking the tool marks out. I'll go back and forth, back and forth. But there's a wedge of light that gets bigger and bigger and bigger here, so that when my faceplate seats, it's going to seat around the rim. So now my glue block is going to seat perfectly on there. Chisel this off. Doesn't have to be pretty, it just has to be gone. That's going to be kind of waste wood in the bottom anyway, but I don't want a hump in the middle. So now my glue block is going to seat around the rim and not have a hump in the middle, right? All right, got to make a little drill dimple in here as my centering device. Not a hole, but just a little dimple enough so that my high-tech coat hanger can go through the center hole of my glue block. And now this is my centering device, my holding device for putting the glue on. If I don't have the coat hanger, it won't stay in the right position. When I put the glue on, it'll go and be in the wrong place. So now that's not very good light. You see better here? Maybe. I don't know if you can see my line. All right, I'm going to put a nice bead of glue. This is the thick CA glue now. Only the thick. Medium and the thin won't work for this. Thick glue. And I'm going to put the accelerator on here. I don't want to spray here where it's going to get over there. I'm going to do that off the camera behind me so that it won't get on the glue. So nice and wet. Put it in here, down there. Done deal. Now I just have to wait a whole 2 or 3 minutes. Spray around there where the glues is out a little bit. I'll spray a little extra accelerator around there just to make sure that doesn't come spitting up on my face shield. Now another thing, when we're not using a chuck, I don't need the tailstock anymore. The tailstock just gets in the way. It's an obstacle I don't want to have to deal with. If we're using a faceplate or a glue block, we don't need the tailstock anymore. Get it out of the way. We have our bowl in this orientation now with the grain running parallel to the bed of the lathe. Let's talk about this process a minute. There's lots of different ways of doing this. And so I choose to do both the inside and the outside on the same holding method. I don't do the outside first and reverse it and do the inside. I got to chew this up first, so let me do this real quick. There it is. That's where I need to be round. That's where the top of the bowl is going to be. Remember in here, I had the pith. Pith is still in here. So I want to get down below that, and I want to even take more than that. I'm going to get down in there. I'm going to take maybe another ½ inch more than that. I'm going to come down in here so that I get away from that pith. And the pith is always unstable. There's always going to be little cracks and things that are there that sometimes are hard to see. We can even see these. There's a crack right there. But the pith is always unstable, and the wood is trying to, when it dries out, is trying to shrink itself in on that pith. And the closer we are to the pith, the more stresses there are in the drying process. So I'm going to waste a little bit of wood away here and make a shallower bowl because I don't want it to warp as badly, and I want to make sure that pith is not in there. All right, so let's get rid of this wood. When we clean this surface up and we clean this surface up, that's going to be the rim of our bowl. So I'm going to leave that alone for a while until I start to undercut it and work with that. Push cut, have the bevel lined up parallel to the tool rest, and I'm just going to make another line across here. I'm hogging off a pretty good shoulder there. Maybe making a 1/4, 3/8 inch. Large shaving cuts, it's no big deal. All right, so now we've made a waste wood area here so that my bowl can finish itself underneath here without worrying about making a funnel. When we're outside of the bowl again, in order to have supported cuts, we have to have a cut that's going to go downhill to the fibers, not uphill. So we don't want to go this way and tear it up. We want to go this way so it's supported, supported, supported as we're making cuts, right? So we need to go from the bottom out. Now, if I'm going from the bottom out to the rim, how can I get my handle over here to get my bevel support? I can't. The headstock's in my way. So we have to use a pull cut. The pull cut has a bevel support, and the pull cut's going to go downhill to the grain with the same kind of efficiency that the push cut is. But now we're going to use the side of the tool instead of the tip. I guess I can use this little mock-up to help maybe understand that. Okay, when we're doing a push cut, our bevel support's right up here at the tip where the pencil line is, right? And we're going to follow that bevel and make a cut. All right, we can't do that here because the head's stuck in the way. So I'm going to now switch. My bevel support now is going to be over on the side of the tool. So I'm going to have my handle low. I'm going to have the bevel support on the side. I'm going to roll my wrist like this and make a cut happen, and then I'm going to go out the correct way to the grain. There's my bevel support here. Nothing's going to happen. If I hit my bevel on that, the heel of my bevel is hitting underneath, right? I'm going to roll my wrist over and just get that little whisk of a shaving. Now that means that bevel's lined up. Let's go hit these little corners. Bevel first, roll my wrist, pull my hand forward. Bevel first, roll my wrist, pull my hand forward. Bevel first, roll my wrist, pull my hand forward. All right. The wood's coming down this way. Now I've got my handle lowered way, way down. The handle, the tip of my handle is down by my knee, and the bevel support is behind, and I roll my wrist over. Bevel support from behind, roll my wrist, and you see where that shaving is coming off right at the tip, and that shaving now is slicing on a 45-degree angle, right? So where's my arrow? Here's my arrow. The slicing action is happening in that direction with the cut happening this way. So now that slicing action is going to leave me a very, very clean cut. If you look at this, there's no torn out grain. Wish we had a better picture. It's not focusing right, but it's trying. No torn out grain here because I'm going the right way. All right. Now let's go back to the overhead. I want to undercut this shoulder a little bit. So I'm going to go back the opposite direction. I'm going to go this way on the outside. I'm still going to use a pull cut here a little bit from this direction to just undercut that shoulder just slightly. You can see that. Okay. All right, let me make it a little bit more severe. Let's come down here. There we go. So it's a little bit flatter here, all right? So we've undercut that shoulder a bit, and we've cleaned up the tool marks from the push cut. We're going to shift down to the shear scrape. Shear scrape again has a 90-degree rule, and when we're on the outside of the bowl, we need to go this direction with our slicing action to have supported fibers. And now we're going to do a scrape, but we're going to add shear. We're going to scrape on a steep slope, on a shear angle. And so I'm going to, instead of just scraping with my handle up, I'm going to scrape with my handle down, and it's going to slice the fibers cleanly. And now we started off with really big hogging off cuts that were 3/8 half-inch wide, and we used the pull cut, and the pull cut makes smaller shavings. And now we're going to go to shear scrape, and we're going to go to very little tiny angel hair to clean up those last little tool marks. My pull cut was like this, right? I'm going to stop the pull cut or push cut. I'm going to close the flute, and I'm going to lower my handle. You can't really see it in the camera that well, but I'm going to lower my handle. And now we're going to make little tiny angel hair shavings. So I can clean this. My goal with shear scraping is I want to clean up the surface so I don't have to sand it. Well, sand very little. I want to start sanding with 320 grit, and it's not very difficult to do. Now on here, we got to go back up the other way, so I'm going the opposite direction with my handle down again here, and we clean up. There's a little bump right at the apex of that arc. So now I'd spend some considerable time cleaning up this surface, getting this perfect, so I can refine the line. I can get the arc of the shape perfect, no flat spots, have a nice pleasing arc, and there's where the shape situation comes into hand, where there's a very, very subtle difference between a sweet line and one that just is kind of nice bowl, but I can't really tell what's wrong with it, but it doesn't really have a perfect line to it. All right, so we've got all the tool marks out of here now. Everything is clean. All right, so we'll spend some time working on the outside so I don't have to sand it. Again, look at these shavings here. Very, very small, little tiny angel hair shavings. So we're not taking much wood there. All right, let's get on the inside. That's where this undercut shoulder gets a little tricky. Just do this really quickly. I'm going to hog off this inside just with push cuts right straight into the side of the tree with no really effort of making a bowl shape of any kind in here. It's just a matter of wood removal. I'm going to lower this to us just a hair. All right, so let's go in here. I might be blowing shavings right at the camera here a second. I don't know. We'll see. And I'm going to start to swing my handle a little bit. So that I make this curve on the outside, I make a curve on the inside. So before I even get to my wall thickness, I start measuring. So I'm going to rub on the outside, rub on the inside, that's not done yet, and look at the outside. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm just a hair thinner at the outside than I am down at the bottom. I'm maybe just a 32nd, just the thickness of a double fingernail. Probably can't see that in the camera. So I'm just a hair thinner. That's nice to know. Let's make that nice and uniform. How am I going to do that? I got to line the bevel up first so I know where I'm going. Line the bevel up, line the bevel up, line the bevel up, get a little whisk of a shaving. There it is. Now I know that, but now I want to go a little bit deeper. I want to change the thickness towards the bottom. So I'm going to swing my handle away from me just slightly to make my cut so that my shaving now is going to get bigger and bigger towards the bottom. I don't know if you can see that little shoulder. I'm watching that shoulder, hopefully, so that I make that uniform. The bevel support is following behind, and the cut's being made. The direction of the cut is being made by the fulcrum, the pivot point of our steering is right here in the push cut. And how are we going to tell whether we're going in the right direction is the thickness of that shaving, the notch there that's left between the wood that's cut and not cut yet. If I don't swing my handle, what's going to happen? It's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper in there, and the shaving is going to get wider and wider and wider. So I have to swing my handle faster. What if I swing my handle too fast and the shaving gets smaller and smaller and smaller and exits out into air? Then I swing my handle too fast. So that little shoulder is the feedback that I need to watch. So I have my pace really nice and slow so I can watch that shoulder, and I can start to keep, in this case, I made my shaving a little bit thinner at the rim and I allowed it to get a little bit thicker towards the bottom of that stage so that I made that uniform, right? Now this is what we don't want to do. We don't want to come off the bevel. If we come off the bevel, where does the tool want to go? It wants to go into the wood, and that's a catch. Best case scenario, if we get off the bevel, is that we can hang on and white knuckle our way through and just force it and just, but that's going to leave a whole bunch of tool marks behind that you got to go back and sand till the cows come home. So I don't want to deal with that. This is going to make a nice clean cut. This, even if you don't get a catch, this is going to make a rough cut in there that's going to be hard to sand. All right. So our feedback is that little shoulder that we were watching. Now, if I look in here, I'm down to the apex of, well, let's go to this camera. I'm down to the apex of the largest diameter here is where my first stage is. I don't want to make my stage much bigger than that because I wanted to make this fairly thin. So I'm going to take another cut here and make this thinner, but the direction that I'm making is perfect. So I'm going to continue that, line up the bevel again, line up the bevel, can't see it with a whisk of a shaving in there, get my shaving cleaned off. All right, line up my bevel. There it is. Go back over, move it over, take another cut. Now I know my bevel's lined up in the right place, and I'm watching that little shoulder. And stop before I hit the waistwood here. So we've got the bowl coming around and a little bit of an undercut shoulder, right? And we've got our surface here. I'm going to leave it thick at this point. We got coming around here, and then we got some waistwood, right? Got her so far? All right. Where's the grain orientation? Okay. Now, when we were on the outside, we went from here to here, right? When we were on the outside, so that we could have supported fibers. What happens on the inside? I guess I didn't draw this very well, but we gotta go. There we go. All right. On the inside, We need to go from the largest diameter out now. Oh, that's kind of strange, isn't it? All the time when we're doing a bowl, the best way to do a bowl is to go from the rim to the inside. That's downhill supported fibers. But what happens in that last little reveal, that last little ½ inch, the grain orientation is going the opposite way, where we need to go the opposite way if we're going to make a clean cut. I've got a very sharp tool and a good technique going with a slicing cut happening, but I think if we, I don't know if we can see it in the camera or not. Yeah, too much light or not enough light, I don't know. But there's just a little bit of torn out grain right here, right in the bottom. So now I want to clean that up. I want to make sure I don't have to sand. One of the things that's a problem with these undercut rims, I don't know how many of you have ever tried doing these, is that undercut is always torn up, and it always has got to sand and sand and sand and sand away through that torn out grain. So I want to try to prevent that as much as I can and take that off with the tool control. So I'm going to lower my handle, and I'm going to shear scrape that last little ½ inch of an area in there. Now this is a little bit tricky, a little bit risky because of the curved surface in there. You want to make sure that this top edge is very, very close. If you open that up at all, it's going to get a catch. So the top edge has to be very close, and you're cutting with the bottom edge. Right. If my gouge is like this, and my tool rest is here, there's my support in the middle, right? If my bowl gouge is closed, not very good picture here, and my tool rest is here, now my support is up where the cutting action is, right? This is going to cause some twisting action. It's going to want to try to push this down when there's no support under here. So again, we have to have that close with this top edge as close as we can to the wood and cut with the bottom edge so that we can shear scrape safely in there. If we open this up just a little bit, the forces are going to want to push down on that, and it could get a catch. All right, so let's go back into here again, and we just shear scrape that really quickly. Lower my handle, use the tip of the tool where, again, the tip of the tool is going to give me more support up in front where the tip is cutting, and compared where the tip is cutting up here compared to the wing area, right? So now I'm going the right way to the grain, sucking the fibers uphill. Little tiny angel hair shavings, right? Tiny, tiny, tiny. Woo! I can even feel it. It is so sweet in there. Now that torn out grain is gone. Okay, cool. All right, let's go on real quickly. That was the main thing I wanted to cover with this whole demo, is this grain orientation right here at the rim is a terrible frustration. Normally, when I'm not in a hurry, I'm going to measure between each cut so I don't make a funnel. Who's in control here? If I just do this, I can try to figure out, well, maybe I could make another cut, but I'm going to use a caliper so that I can make sure. All right, I'm nice and uniform now. I got a little bit of a shoulder there left over. I'm going to make one more cut. You can see the shoulder down here, right? I'm going to make one more cut. What am I going to do? Go get a sharp tool. Line up my bevel with the previous cut. Bevel first. Now let's look at the pace. Very slow pace. Nice slicing cut across that surface. Okay. Oh, I did a very nice arc there. The transition, that's another hard spot. The transition between that undercut and the rest of the bowl sometimes is a little funky, and you get into a place where you got to sand some. But that works really nice. No transition marks. Perfect. See how I'm slowing down now as I get further and further down, closer to my finish shape of my bowl, slowing my pace down. Fast speed of the lathe, slow pace of my tool. I can't measure that now, so I'm just going to feel it. See where I'm at. I'm a little bit flat across the bottom, but that's pretty good arc already. Now I'm going to go get a brand new sharp tool. Again, I just sharpened a minute ago, but I'm going to get another one because this is a surface I'm going to have to sand. Pick up my bevel in front of the shoulder. There's a little whisk of a shaving, see it? So I'm going to continue that through. Now I've really slowed down, very, very slow. Got to wait for those fibers to come around. And even as I get closer and closer to the middle, I got to get slower and slower because the wood's going slower. So the pace across the center is very, very slow and end up in the middle. All right. See how I did. Oh, yeah, I can live with that. Beautiful. Now I let this dry out and sand it. But which camera am I on? Okay, I'm going to use a piece of leather as padding. And I want to put paper towel in there so that the color of the leather is not going to stain it with the water in the wood. And so now I've got a piece of padding. You use all kinds of different paddings. And I'm going to bring this up, bring my tailstock up. All right, remember our drill hole. The little drill dimple when I put the glue on was still there. Okay, that's going to be a good place to start. Lock the spindle. How tight do I tighten it? Tight enough so that it'll drive with just the friction. A little bit more. Right in the middle of the bowl, I need some wall thickness. I have about 1/8 of an inch thick here, so I've got a wall thickness. Come on, right. There we go. And then I'm going to have a little bit of reveal, a little bit of a hollow in here. So where it's going to sit on the table is going to be a little bit proud of that. Take it down to the table height. Everything else above that line is junk. Now I'm not taking too big of cuts and I'm not going too fast now because it's just driving with friction. Okay, so that's where it's going to sit on the table. Now, the second thing I do, I'm going to pick a diameter, and I'm going to use a little notch here because this is just waste wood anyway. And I'm going to look at the diameter of that foot, and I'm going to say, yeah, that would make a nice functional foot if I wanted to leave this as a functional bowl, which it really is. It's going to have, you know, popcorn or M&Ms or something in it and going to be usable. So a large foot is good, so it's got stability. But I don't really make functional things, so I want it to be non-functional. I'm going to make that foot smaller. So let's take another little bit here and say, that's a good sized foot to make it a little bit lighter, a little bit lift off the table and give it some different character than function. So now everything in between, that's where it's going to sit on the table, and this is already done here. All that stuff in between just needs to go away. So again, I'm going to do a pull cut. I'm going to make a cut going downhill to the fibers. Bevel support first on the side. Pull cut, pull cut, pull cut. You come in here. Now, I don't want to get into here, so I'm going to leave that alone for a minute. And let me just clean up this foot. I'm going to make a little taper on the foot. I want to make a nice clean landing there that I don't have to sand much. Here again is where I don't do a lot of detail because I'd have to sand the detail and I'm basically lazy. So, all right. So now I'm going to lower my handle and do shear scraping now to clean up this area and taper it into the finish bowl. I'm not going back up on the finish bowl. You know, I don't like that. It's too flat right there. So I'm going to make that a little bit deeper. Let me go in here and make this a little bit deeper, right in here, and then start to go out to my bowl. Yeah, that's a better line now. There's not a little flat spot there, right? Okay. Perfect. Now I always want to do a little bit of detail in the bottom. When somebody picks your bowl up and looks at the bottom, what do you want to tell them? You want to show them that you take care of detail, that you're proud of this bowl, and you're going to work on every little part of it, not leave the bottom just kind of funky and flat. So I'm going to make this a little bit undercut. And then I'm going to take my spindle gouge. It's the first time I've used any other gouge but that bowl gouge. Take a spindle gouge because it's got a steeper grind. I'm going to just roll over a little tiny bead in here just to make some detail, just to show that it's been turned, just to show that I care about this bottom a little bit. Roll a bead. Okay, now that fuzzed up that little leading edge, so I'm going to come back over behind it and just take that little bit of fuzz off of that and finish that. All right. So now we've got the whole thing done except for that little nub. So I wasn't quite in the middle. I missed it just a little bit. I'm maybe a ½ inch off here of those lines going right into the middle, but it's pretty close. It's pretty good. If you see here, yeah, you see the grain here and the grain here is balanced. So who's in control? When we start between centers like that, we can make something special. And so pass the good word around, especially if you've got a turning club that wants us to come in and do a virtual demonstration for your club. Those are also available. So pass the good news around for us, and we'll see you next time around.